always say, I only read them. None of us here actually understand. Janet and John go to the supermarket. John puts on his best shopping clothes.
Yes.
Pink velvet suit with a white frilly shirt, a pink cravat, and a matching hat and wristwatch. John is a popinjay. And Janet says, "Come along, John, or we'll miss the bus." She can hardly speak.
I can tell you've met her because you got that voice off to absolutely.
See John quickly finish putting on his false eyelashes. And when Janet and John arrive in town, Janet says, "Do you want to come to the shop with me, or would you prefer to play on the slide and swings? I think there's something wrong with her teeth." Do you like swinging? John does. John says, "I'd like to go to the playground, please." And Janet says, "Right, I'll meet you when I've done the shopping. Try not to get into mischief." "I will," says John. See John hop and skip over to the playground. When John arrives at the playground, all of the swings are being used, so John goes on the slide. See John come down the slide backwards. Silly John. See John fall off the slide. See John blub. Mrs. Fagan from the playgroup picks John up and dusts him off. Mrs. Fagan says, "Oh dear, I think you've broken your watch too." See John blub again. Mrs. Fagan says, "There's a jeweler's just around the corner. Why don't you see if they can fix it?" John thanks Mrs. Fagan and trots over to the jeweler's. Ding-a-ling goes the shop. I wouldn't say this show was cheap, but John sees Mrs. Mason. "Hello, Mrs. Mason," says John. Mrs. Mason is from Liverpool. Mrs. Mason says, "Oh, God. I see you've broken your watch. Let me see if I can fix it for you."
That's the Liverpool just outside Barnsley.
Yeah. Nobody said she was born in Liverpool. John says, "The glass is broken. There's a big scratch on the face, and both of the hands are bent." Mrs. Mason says, "I see you've grazed your hand too. I used to be a nurse. I'll put some ointment on it for you." Mrs. Mason looks in her workshop and says, "I think I have some parts that will fit this watch. We sell and repair citizen watches. Well, we don't get many in pink." Mrs. Mason goes to the back of the shop while John dries his trousers near the radiator. Soon, Mrs. Mason has repaired John's watch. John pays Mrs. Mason, hops and skips gaily back to the playground. And when John arrives, Janet is waiting. Janet says, "Where have you been?" And John says, "I had an accident. Fell off the slide and damaged my pink citizen." Mrs. Fagan had a quick look and said she knew a lady who used to be a nurse who could help. Mrs. Mason said it would need 2 hands and a face put on it before it would work properly again. She did it all in a few minutes and only charged me £20. Can you roar like a bull elephant? Janet can. See John run. Run, John.